Give you guys a minute to get settled. That's right. Side. Okay, I just want to give another thank you to all our panelists for this afternoon. We'll now move on to the first set of presentations in session 3, PMTA scientific content. First, we have Ms. Awita Holmes and Dr. Priscilla Callahan-Lyon presenting an overview of the PMTA content. Ms. Holmes? Sorry. That's okay. Sorry. Oh, there it is. It's coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Awita Holmes, and I'm the Program Analyst in the Office of Science, Division of Individual Health Science. Earlier today, Ms. Busta described the PMTA process with a focus on the programmatic aspects. My presentation will focus on scientific content. I will not review the bullet points as Emily did. However, it is important for applicants to ensure the PMTA addresses each of these points adequately as they relate to Section 910 of the Tobacco Control Act. With respect to PMTAs, to understand if a new tobacco product is appropriate for the protection of public health, which will now be referred as a PPH, FDA must evaluate a product's impact on the population as a whole, meaning current tobacco product users as well as non-users. Current tobacco product users are a broad category. Each of these types of tobacco product users may have varying health risk. As such, it is important for applicants to define populations, especially in the context of study design. As an example, let's consider non-users. Non-users may be individuals who have not previously used tobacco products, but who are now experimenting or have never used a tobacco product. In September of this year, FDA issued the proposed rule. The proposed rule is open for comment and closes on November 25th. If finalized, the proposed rule will provide the general procedures for review from application receipt to order issuance, require manufacturers to maintain records establishing their tobacco products are legally marketed, and would help to ensure that applications contain sufficient information for FDA to determine whether to issue a marketing order. The proposed rule also describes the 180-day review clock and explains when the clock can be paused or extended, when FDA can refuse to file applications, explain the different types of applications allow applicants to cross-reference an existing application, describes how scientific literature or bridging can be used, and identifies post-marketing reporting requirements. FDA is inviting comments on a number of issues, including the topics, specific design parameters, how co-packaging products impact consumer use and behavior, definitions of commercially marketed and test marketing, required and requested information for marketing plans, and the length of time it takes a tobacco product user to consume a single unit of a product. After the comment period closes, FDA will review the comments and then determine next steps. Please note that the final rule may be different from the proposed rule. Comments to the proposed rule can be submitted electronically to the website listed here or mailed. In addition to the proposed rule, FDA has the PMTA ends guidance available that is relevant to PMTA submissions. The guidance is not FDA implemented policy. Rather, the guidance communicates FDA's recommendations for submitting a PMTA, as well as the general procedures by which FDA intends to review a PMTA. A question an applicant may have is, what is the difference between the PMTA proposed rule and the PMTA's guidance? The difference between the PMTA proposed rule and the PMTA's guidance is that the proposed rule is an official document that announces and explains the agency's plan to address content, format, review of a PMTA, generally for tobacco products. The PMTA for ENDS guidance was published to further clarify and assist in the review of ENDS tobacco products. A final guidance is not binding on the FDA or the public. However, it represents FDA's current thinking on a topic. So let's move on to talking about various scientific studies and analyses that are helpful to support a PMTA. First, it is important for the FDA to understand what the proposed product is and how it works. To understand what the product is, information relating to the product's parts is useful, what it is made from, and how it is manufactured. The chemistry evaluation takes into consideration information such as product formulation, chemistry design, tobacco blend, ingredients other than tobacco, manufacturing steps and controls, performance criteria, stability, ranges of exposure, and aerosol content. The engineering and microbiology analysis involves looking at product design, principles of operation, as well as manufacturing and packaging. FDA currently does not have requirements on reporting of design features regarding specific products such as ENDS. The proposed rule on PMTA states the following information is helpful to assess the non-clinical risk of a new tobacco product, such as identification of potential human health risk, focuses on exposures to users, describes packaging that may mitigate risk of accidental exposures to e-liquids, evaluation of ingredients including leachables and extractables. In addition, a list of useful considerations to include is described here. The proposed rule on PMTA states that a PMTA include a comparison of the new tobacco product to a representative sample of a tobacco product legally on the market. When discussing comparator products information, it is important to have justification in your PMTA regarding why using data from certain other products to support your PMTA is appropriate. The tobacco product market can be considered in many ways. The most appropriate comparators are likely to be what potential users of your proposed product already uses. For example, for ENDS, manufacturers typically state that the target consumer is a current smoker. Thus, cigarettes could be an appropriate comparator. It could also be appropriate for ENDS manufacturers to compare their products to similar other ENDS products. The proposed rule states that applicants consider including the following information to assess the human health impact of a new tobacco product. Evaluations of the likelihood of initiation and cessation by both users and non-users of tobacco products may include the evaluation of perceptions of product risk, both absolute and in comparison to other tobacco products, as well as quitting all tobacco use, abuse liability and addictiveness, evaluation of product use patterns, evaluations of acute and longer-term health effects. The applicant may use biomarkers of harm, biomarkers of exposure, health outcome measurements, or other endpoints, labeling comprehension, and human factor issues impacting product use and misuse. The proposed rule states that each clinical investigation included in the PMTA should have been reviewed and approved by an institutional review board. Examples of human studies include likelihood of initiation and cessation studies, which can be defined in different ways. It is useful if clear definitions and rationale are provided for how they are being defined in any particular setting in order to support meaningful interpretation of research findings. FDA acknowledges that it may not be feasible to directly measure the rate of uptake of a new product in the population if it has never been on the market. Even if a product is on the market, there may not be a sufficient number of users to directly study initiation in an observational study. However, there are many different types of studies and lines of evidence that could provide information about the likelihood that the existing users will stop or non-users will start using tobacco products. General principles suggest that multiple lines of evidence would strengthen an argument related to the likelihood of tobacco product initiation and cessation. Moving on to human studies. I would like to start this section by discussing consumer perception studies. Understanding health risk of a product can be informed by evaluating the perception and appeal of a product and its impact on behavior intentions and actual behavior. Product perception intentions, including how consumers, especially youth, perceive, use, or intend to use the products, is useful information to the FDA. Qualitative research provides insights to individuals' thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and can serve as a useful evidence in understanding a product's impact once it is on the market. Studies of consumer perceptions generally follow established methods, such as the use of best practices for questionnaire design to avoid bias and to ensure that the data collected is valid. In addition, the sample size in these types of studies can vary depending on the research question, but usually a clear rationale for the sample size is given based upon practical considerations, statistical power to detect effects, and other factors. The use of validated items whenever possible allows for the data collected to be compared to other studies and also ensures that the data collected are measured for what they are intending to measure. Along those lines, clearly defined aims that are specified before data collection begins allows for transparency. Overall, a clear explanation of the method and sample included in the study allows others to better understand the results and context. As in all human studies, protection of human subjects is a critical element and should be considered and described. Information allowing FDA to evaluate how the proposed new product may influence initiation among youth is useful to determine the protection of public health. FDA does not require youth behavioral studies at this time. However, information to allow FDA to evaluate how the proposed new product may influence tobacco initiation among youth is useful to determine if the product is a PPH. FDA will look to identify steps manufacturers took to minimize the risk to kids. Inferences regarding youth may be extrapolated from young adults, as well as derived from marketing data, scientific literature reviews, national surveys, and/or bridging information. Abuse liability testing is another type of assessment that may offer data and information to support an understanding of the likelihood of initiation and cessation of tobacco products. Abuse liability assessments traditionally are designed to evaluate the likelihood of abuse, which can also assess consequences of abuse. In general, the determination of a product's abuse potential can be accomplished through multiple lines of evidence. Study design information that is helpful for FDA in reviewing pharmacology studies include comparison of nicotine's effects on pharmacodynamic PK and PD, switching studies, explanation of selection of prescribed puffing regimens, rationale for selection for comparator products, study limitations are identified, and discussing of existing literature. So let's move on to discuss product labeling. In order to authorize a PMTA, the proposed labeling cannot be false or misleading. A label comprehension study can be conducted to evaluate whether consumers understand the key label messaging and communication of information. The general design concepts to consider are to establish primary communication objectives, specify study designs that meet objectives and calculate appropriate sample size, enroll an appropriate population, construct a questionnaire that targets objectives, set a priority target thresholds, and using test labeling as close as possible to your final labeling is the most useful. Going back to thinking about the proposed product itself, human factors are important to consider when designing a product. Human factor considerations assess if users will be able to operate the product appropriately by focusing on the interactions between the people and products. Importantly, when considering a new proposed product, FDA seeks to understand the likely impact on human health. To evaluate the acute and chronic health effects associated with the proposed product or poly-tobacco product use, the proposed rule out for public comment states that the applicant includes studies, other scientific evidence, or both that identify biomarkers and health outcome measurements or endpoints. Provide data to support the impact of the new tobacco product on the health of users and non-users. This may include health effects related to specific constituents. When designing studies, it is helpful if the study findings are generalizable to the population of U.S. users and non-users of your new tobacco product. If you are relying on published reports to support your PMTA, consider justifying why the data from those reports can be bridged to your product and are appropriate for determining the impact of the new product on the U.S. population that are likely the consumers. In terms of individual risk, we are seeking to understand the product health impact on users and non-users. Clinical endpoints are the gold standard of understanding the impact of a product on health. However, clinical endpoints can take years to decades to develop. Appropriate biomarkers may serve as substitute endpoints and have the potential to correctly predict clinically meaningful endpoints in the interim. Applicants have also asked, what biomarkers are used to measure when evaluating tobacco products such as ENDS? As with all biomarkers, those that are specific to exposure and have changes that are clinically relevant are the most useful. There is not an agreed upon panel of biomarkers established to understand ENDS' impact on human health at this time. Applicants have also asked, what studies are required to support a PMTA? It may be possible to support a marketing order for an ENDS product without conducting new non-clinical or clinical studies, given other data sources can support this PMTA. In most situations, it is likely that at least some analytical testing specific to the product would be conducted to support your PMTA. If conducting studies, alternatives to the traditional randomized controlled clinical trials, which are typically used for drug development, may be appropriate to support a PMTA. Again, the most useful studies are those that are generalizable to the U.S. population. If you have a product currently available on the market, it is possible that research has been done on that product, or your product is similar to other products which are the subject of publicly available research studies, in which case you may submit the available information along with bridging information to justify use. Ideally, a PMTA will contain studies conducted with respect to the new tobacco product itself, but the bridging of data from different product to the new product that is subject of the application may be feasible for a subset of products or for certain types of studies. It is likely that most PMTAs will include various data sources to support the submission, such as published or peer-reviewed literature, analysis of existing national data sets, such as NYTS or PATH, and original scientific investigations. Literature reviews are a likely component of PMTAs, as I just mentioned, and literature reviews typically include the purpose of the review, the evaluation of methods, the review of results, bibliography, and conducting independent analysis of published studies that include study details can also support a PMTA. Finally, moving on to what is a PPH and the FDA PMTA review. I have reiterated that FDA must determine if the proposed product, which is subject of the PMTA, is a PPH. Applicants must address the statutory requirements as appropriate pertaining to PMTAs in the Act. All ingredients, components, constituents are evaluated based upon how they contribute directly and indirectly to the total health impact of a specific product. To facilitate review, it is important to summarize the key product characteristics and study results that you believe would make the marketing of your product a PPH. The questions listed on this slide are examples of the types of issues FDA has discussed in deciding whether a product is a PPH. Are HPHCs and other toxic constituent levels in the new tobacco product similar or lower than levels of other appropriate comparator products? Does the scientific evidence indicate lower disease risk to an individual compared to the appropriate comparator? Will the marketing of a new tobacco product affect the likelihood of non-user uptake, cessation rates, or other significant shifts in user demographics in a manner to decrease morbidity and mortality from tobacco product use? It is the applicant's responsibility to provide scientific evidence and justification to support that a product is a PPH. A product that is found a PPH today may not be a PPH in the future. In the next few slides, I will talk about the challenges FDA has in reviewing PMTAs. Here are some examples of challenges seen by FDA reviewers during the acceptance review. Applications have been sent to FDA without including an environmental assessment. Applications have been sent in a format that FDA cannot process. And applicants have sent in information with insufficient product identifying information. FDA reviewers have also identified incomplete or missing information on the following items during the scientific review phase: ingredients, product stability testing, design parameters, manufacturing steps, manufacturing facilities. Some of the facilities in the application are listed, but not all of them are described. Study design and reports are not included, even though a study may have been mentioned. And biomarkers may have been evaluated, but there is no rationale for the selection of biomarkers used, and the results were not interpreted. In addition, omission of protocols and methodology validation reports, missing data from clinical and non-clinical studies. Studies submitted were conducted on a prototype of the device and not the device actually subject for marketing. And bridging data was not provided to clearly link the information. It can be difficult to distinguish which version of the product is intended for market. And deciphering tobacco product naming conventions can also be problematic. Another significant challenge that impedes progress is the applicants have sent new study data and large amendments to FDA for review towards the end of FDA's scientific review phase. Reviewing additional information has caused delays in FDA issuing no marketing orders. I've discussed a lot of information in a short amount of time. I've hoped that you found the information helpful in your effort to develop a quality PMTA submission. Up next is my colleague, Dr. Callahan Lyon. She will provide in her presentation examples of informative studies and other supportive information from the ICOS submission. Thank you for your time.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Priscilla Callahan. I'm the Deputy Director for the Division of Individual Health and FDA. Oh, sorry. Better. I'll start over. I'm Priscilla Callahan. I'm Deputy Division Director in Division of Individual Health Science at CTP's Office of Science. And I'm going to discuss some information regards to the ICOS submission and specifically what kinds of information they used in that submission that allowed us to authorize marketing of the product as a PMTA. So just for those that may not know, ICOS is a non-combusted cigarette product. It includes a heat stick, a holder, and a charger. The tobacco is heated with this product. It's not burned or combusted, and I've included a picture of the device and the holder and the heat stick packaging here. So what types of information did they include in their applications? I'm going to go through this at a very high level, keeping in mind the kinds of things that Ms. Holmes just discussed in her PMTA presentation. I also have included on some of the slides, just you'll see in note in a red circle, just hints and other suggestions that you might consider in your PMTA applications for the future. So with regards to engineering data, they provided us a complete description of the product designs and parameters, as well as manufacturing steps and quality control measures. They also outlined very clearly the process controls and quality assurance measures to ensure that the products met manufacturing specifications that were set by the applicant and that they would be manufactured in a consistent manner. There was performance standards and performance testing to verify product design, and specifications and independent test results for the battery were conducted by FDA and found to be satisfactory. With regards to chemistry, they provided a complete list of the uniquely identified components, ingredients, and additives with applicable specifications and a description of the intended function of each of these materials, as well as a description of the steps and the quality control measures, and evidence of product stability, including microbiological testing. The testing data for certain HPHCs was included in the applications. These are some of the ones that were included, but I have the note here, applicants should provide data that will assist FDA in determining their product as a PPH, and the specific types of information needed may vary depending upon the product type. With regards to the toxicological risk assessment, the applications included measures of HPACs in the aerosols and compared it to 3R4F cigarette smoke. They also made comparisons for HPHCs and tar to U.S. marketed cigarettes. They included measures of nicotine in the heat sticks and the aerosol, as well as non-targeted differential screening assays and in vitro and in vivo studies. For the behavior and clinical pharmacological assessment, 4 PK/PD studies were included in the applications. There were also 4 exposure studies, 2 of which lasted for 5 days and 2 of which lasted for 90 days, and 1 actual use study. Another note, information to consider may include nicotine exposure relative to other tobacco products, abuse liability, the attractiveness and likability of your product, and the likelihood of switching and/or use of multiple products. For individual health impact, they included quite a lot of information. We had the 4 exposure studies that were mentioned earlier, and these did include measures of biomarkers of exposure. The biomarkers of exposure were selected by the applicant to correspond with 14 HPHCs in nicotine and nicotine alkaloids.
Back, everyone.
They were assessed after a 5-day confinement period and also after a 90-day ambulatory period, and compared results were given for studies conducted in the United States and in other countries where the product is currently marketed. As regards to biomarkers of potential harm, they selected these, and these were also selected by the applicant on the basis of key mechanisms for 3 smoking-associated diseases: cardiovascular disease, COPD, and lung cancer. The applicant selected these and provided the rationale, as well as significant literature on the selected BOPHs and the relationship with the diseases of interest. Other individual health impact measures included adverse experiences associated with the acute exposure in the clinical studies, an actual use study to evaluate uptake and use in the current U.S. adult cigarette smokers, consumer reports and complaints from countries where the product is currently marketed, an updated literature review during the course of the application review with case studies and other reports. And they also provided long-term 6-month continuation of one clinical study with long-term BOE and BOPH data and information on uptake, continued use, and dual use. Not all of these may be needed for any particular product application. So what you need to consider is what information FDA needs in order to determine that marketing of the product is APPH and how it can best be provided. With regards to other factors under individual health, we consider the human factors. This was discussed to some degree by Ms. Holmes. This is the way people will actually use the product, an actual use study to assess product misuse, as well as an evaluation of the events, device malfunctions, and other potential for serious issues. The applicant also included consumer comprehension study of the labeling, and what they did with this was a study evaluating the ability of prospective customers to understand and comply with product instructions. This is another note. The type of human factor studies and comprehension testing may vary depending on the product type and the potential for misuse. It may also be important to demonstrate that the product is unlikely to expose high-risk groups, such as children. With regards to population health, we have to consider several things, and you've heard these today. Number one is the likelihood of product use by current cigarette smokers. So in this particular application, they included perception study with different brochures and package labeling and warning statements. And the study included smokers, former smokers, never smokers, and young adult never smokers. Information was also submitted with the actual use study, which evaluated use of the product in the United States and included product initiation and use patterns, as well as dual use and switching over a period of 6 weeks. Whole offer testing was their term for a product study that was conducted outside of the United States and evaluated product initiation and use patterns in other countries where the product was already currently marketed. With regards to poly use of the product with cigarettes or other tobacco products, the applicant provided data from 2 different post-marketing surveys in a country where the product is already marketed, as well as additional data from the actual use study and the clinical studies. With regards to the likelihood of the use of the product leading to cigarette smoking cessation, again, we had information from the actual use study and the whole offer test, as well as post-market survey information. Other population health impact studies that were included were uptake of the product by former or never smokers or youth. This is obviously of great interest to FDA. So the perception study did provide some information with regards to the intent to try the product in former smokers, never smokers, and young adult smokers or never smokers. The cross-sectional studies were also conducted to monitor prevalence of this in similar products in adult non-smokers. There were some data from outside of the United States where the product is currently marketed, as well as face-to-face survey data that were presented from a different country where participants as young as 15 years old were surveyed on their likelihood of use of the product. Of note, there was no specific U.S. data provided for youth. In this particular situation, FDA must consider the likelihood that those not using a tobacco product will start using the product, and although use studies are not specifically required, we do need you to consider how the information that you can provide will be used to support this particular aspect of FDA review. Marketing plans were concluded in the applications. These were very high level and provided a general approach to their marketing strategy with sample labeling. They also clarified at our request their strategy for limiting youth exposure and hopefully uptake of the products. In addition, in the post-marketing reporting period, which was included in the marketing authorization letter, we provided requirements for them to provide FDA with periodic reports of product sales and distribution by location, market type, and product type. We also included the situation where they will provide prior notification to FDA for marketing plans and materials. They will provide an analysis of delivery of advertising impressions by age breakouts. Adverse health reports will be included in the periodic reporting, as well as other consumer complaints, especially those regarding product quality. So in summary, and I'm going to go back to some of the points that have been made before, it is very, very important that you include all of the information in your original submission. As has been mentioned several times, amendments are challenging. Each amendment must be evaluated as to whether it's major or minor, and major amendments can prolong your product review and delay a decision. The other point I want to make is that it's important to provide FDA a very clear picture that we can follow during the the application review, using consistent terminology such as product naming, study name, consistently throughout the application makes it very helpful and is much easier for us. organizing the data and provide an accurate table of contents with all the codes and definitions and other materials that we need in order to review the applications. If you're bridging data, provide a rationale and clear explanation for why this is important for your particular product, and clearly describe your approach, the study methods, the approach to the statistical analysis, the literature search methods and terms, and anything else that you think would make it easier for us to review your applications. Thank you.
Thank you again to Ms. Holmes and Dr. Callahan-Lyon. Next, we will have Ms. Christine Saba discussing PMTA post-marketing requirements.
Okay, I believe I am the last presentation of the day, and so I will try and keep my remarks brief to get everybody out of here on time. Today, I will be presenting the proposed pre-market tobacco product application post-market reporting requirements for industry. On September 25th, 2019, FDA gave notice of a proposed pre-market tobacco product applications and record-keeping requirements rule, the PMTA and PRM. This proposed rule is available and open for public comment through November 25th, 2019. This presentation will review post-market reporting requirements outlined within the PMTA and PRM. Note these are subject to change within the final rule. PMTA and PRM Subpart D outlines the proposed post-market reporting requirements. Applicants would be required under this proposed section to submit two types of reports to FDA after receiving a marketing order: periodic reports and adverse experience reports. Applicants would need to submit periodic reports within 60 calendar days of the reporting date specified within the marketing order. Adverse experience reports would be required to be reported to FDA within 15 calendar days of receipt or identification. It is proposed that the report include the following: a cover letter that contains the PMTA STN, tobacco product name or names, the company name, date of report, and the reporting period. The proposed rule states that each post-market report must be well organized, legible, and written in English. Documents that have been translated from another language into English, such as original study documents written in a language other than English, must be accompanied by the original language of the study documents, as well as a signed certificate from the manufacturer certifying that the English language translation is complete and accurate. As mentioned, the PMTA and PRM proposes two types of reports that an applicant would be required to submit following a marketing order: periodic reports and adverse experience reports. FDA anticipates that periodic reports would be required on an annual basis, but FDA may require in a specific order that reports may be made more or less frequently, depending on a number of factors, such as the novelty of the type of product. This slide presents a high-level overview of the proposed data elements for each report. Adverse experience reports would include reporting of serious adverse experiences, such as death, life-threatening event, inpatient hospitalization, incapacitation of user, birth defect, any other adverse or serious condition affecting quality of life, as well as unexpected adverse experiences. Each of these would be required to be reported to FDA within 15 calendar days of receipt or identification. Periodic reports include the following broad proposed data categories: a description of the changes made to the manufacturing, facilities, or controls that do not modify the finished tobacco product, inventory of ongoing and completed studies of the tobacco product, a summary of sales and distribution data, data on current product purchasers, final labeling specimens and labeling changes, marketing and advertising implementation plans and reports. These reports will be discussed in more detail in the upcoming slides. First, we will cover adverse experience reporting. The PMTA and PRM proposes the applicant report all serious and unexpected adverse experiences associated with the tobacco product that have been reported to the applicant or that the applicant is aware of to CTP's Office of Science through the HHS Safety Reporting Portal within 15 calendar days after the report is received by the applicant. Qualifying serious adverse experiences were listed in the previous slide, so I won't repeat them again. Unexpected adverse experiences would also be required to be reported. FDA's proposed definition for unexpected adverse experience can be found in Subpart A of the PMTA and PRM. This reporting also includes manufacturing deviations. For products that have been distributed, if a deviation occurs that presents a reasonable probability that the tobacco product contains a manufacturing or other defect not ordinarily contained in tobacco products on the market that could cause serious adverse health consequences or death, the applicant would be required to report this deviation to FDA within 15 calendar days of identification. Now we'll cover periodic reporting in more detail. The PMTA and PRM proposed periodic reporting requirements for the manufacturing changes, deviations, and adverse experiences include a summary and analysis of serious and unexpected adverse experiences identified during the reporting period, accompanied by a statement of any changes to the overall risk associated with the tobacco product, and a summary of any changes in the health risks, including the nature and frequency of the adverse experience, as well as potential risk factors. It should include a summary of all manufacturing deviations, including those associated with the processing, testing, packaging, labeling, storage, holding, and distribution. Note that serious adverse experiences and manufacturing deviations that may cause serious adverse health consequences should be reported to FDA twice, through the Safety Reporting Portal as events are initially received, and again through periodic reporting. A summary of changes made to the manufacturing facilities or controls that do not modify the finished tobacco product, such as manufacturing process changes compared to what was submitted into the PMTA, should also be reported, as well as a rationale for each change. FDA issues marketing orders for the specific new tobacco product described within the PMTA. An applicant may not make any modification, including a change in design, any component, any part, or any constituent, including a smoke constituent, or in the content, delivery, or form of nicotine, or any other additive or ingredient to the product that is the subject of the order. Any modification to the tobacco product that would result in a new tobacco product under the definition in Section 910A1 of the FDA Act would require the applicant to submit a new tobacco product application for the modified tobacco product. Changes that do not result in a new tobacco product, such as manufacturing product changes that do not modify the finished product, would be required to be reported under periodic reporting as described in Subpart D of the PMTA and PRM. FDA may notify an applicant that FDA has determined that a change described in a periodic report results in a new tobacco product outside the scope of the marketing order, requiring the submission of a new tobacco product application and issuance of a new marketing order if the applicant seeks to market the new tobacco product, unless that tobacco product can be legally marketed through a different pre-market pathway. Applicants seeking to make modifications to the tobacco product authorized under a standing order may submit a standard PMTA, a supplemental PMTA, or request for an exemption from substantial equivalence for the modified product in order to seek marketing authorization for that new product. Supplemental PMTAs are based on a cross-referencing system to reduce the burden of both preparing and reviewing a PMTA. Note that the applicant may not market the new tobacco product unless FDA has authorized its marketing. Failure to do so would render it adulterated under Section 910F of the FDA Act and would be subject to enforcement action. The PMTA and PRM proposes the applicant report the following: an inventory of all ongoing and completed studies about the tobacco product conducted by or on behalf of the applicant that were not already submitted as part of the PMTA or previous post-market reports. Full reports of information published or known to or which should be reasonably known to the applicant concerning scientific investigations and/or literature about the tobacco product that were not previously submitted as part of the PMTA or previous post-market reports, as well as significant findings from publications that have not been previously reported to FDA. An assessment of how the product continues to be appropriate for the protection of public health would be required. When determining whether the marketing of a particular new tobacco product would be appropriate for the protection of public health, FDA will evaluate the factors in light of available information regarding the existing tobacco product market, tobacco use behaviors, and associated health risks at the time of review. The PMTA and PRM proposes the reporting of a summary of sales and distribution data of the tobacco product to the extent that the applicant collects or receives such data for the reporting period, including total U.S. sales reported in dollars, units, and volume, with breakdowns by U.S. Census region, major retail markets, and channels in which the product is sold, the universal product code or codes that correspond to the products or product identified in the PMTA, and demographic characteristics of product purchasers, such as age, gender, and tobacco use status. Proposed requirements for labeling and advertising include specimens of all labeling and descriptions of all labeling changes that have not been previously submitted to FDA, including the date the labeling was first disseminated and the date when dissemination was completely terminated, as well as full color copies of all advertising for the tobacco product that have not been previously submitted to FDA, as well as the date the materials were first disseminated and the date the dissemination was completely terminated. The proposed reporting requirements for reporting marketing and advertising plans include a description of the implementation of all advertising and marketing plans by channel and by product, including a dollar amount of each such plan, including a description of any use of competent and reliable data sources, methodologies, and technologies to establish, maintain, and monitor highly targeted advertising and marketing plans and media buys, use of owned, earned, shared media, public relations outreach, paid social media, partners, influencers, bloggers, or brand ambassadors to create labeling for, advertise, market, or promote the products. Consumer engagements conducted by the applicant or on its behalf or at its direction, including events at which the products were demonstrated, as well as an analysis of actual delivery of advertising impressions, including breakouts by age ranges to the extent that this is applicable. Additional proposed reporting includes a description of any targeting of specific adult audiences by age range, including young adults, ages 18 to 24, and other demographic or psychographic characteristics that reflect the intended target audience, including a list of all data sources used to target advertising and marketing plans and media buys, as well as actions taken to restrict youth access and limit youth exposure to the product's labeling, advertising, marketing, or promotion. PMTA and PRM proposed section 1114.31b would allow FDA, using its authority under section 910F of the FD&C Act, to require an applicant to submit post-market reports in addition to those described in PMTA and PRM subpart D, including, but not limited to, requirements that an applicant provide information such as labeling, advertising, marketing, or promotional materials, or marketing plans not previously submitted to FDA, and to do so at least 30 days prior to the initial publication, dissemination to consumers, or use in engaging or communicating with consumers of such materials. In conclusion, the data described in PMTA and PRM subpart D are especially important for FDA to review because the data inform a determination of whether or not the new to product continues to be appropriate for the protection of public health. In particular, the data help FDA to assess whether the information regarding likely tobacco product use behavior described within the PMTA lines up with actual use of the product after authorization. For example, if youth initiation rates associated with the new tobacco product are not what was anticipated within the PMTA, FDA may decide that the product is no longer appropriate for the protection of public health and the marketing authorization may be withdrawn. Finally, please note the PMTA and PRM is open for public comment until November 25th, 2019. Although similar to other NPRMs, the comment period for this may be extended. Applicants may review the ICOST marketing authorization as a reference for post-market reporting requirements, but exact requirements of a marketing order can vary. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Saba. So this concludes our content for today. A special thank you to all the presenters and panelists and all those submitting questions. As a reminder, tomorrow the room that we have will be much smaller, so keep that in mind. And we'll pick back up tomorrow on the next part of session 3, starting with a presentation. Thank you.